How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the penultimate week of the semester. We're just kind of getting in. We're sort of filling in this last little part of world history, the sort of last region that we really haven't circled back to since the times of the Romans, and that's Europe. So we're looking at kind of what Europe did between 15 and 1300, and how it sort of developed. I mean, we've looked at Asia with Tang China and Heian Japan. We've looked at the Pacific. We've looked at Africa. And now we're kind of circling back there. And I think I talked about in the lecture, sometimes this period of time is called a dark age. It was sort of this idea where, there wasn't a lot of trade, interaction, movement. Cities were sort of declining. There weren't a lot of records. A lot of the writing was done by monks and monasteries, mainly religious purposes, and some there. But there is also a new revision, a new look at this period of time where people, I think I mentioned there's a recent book that came out called The Bright Ages, which sort of critiquing this. And in my in-face class, 151 class, we do a little exercise where I have some people that take the argument, right, that this was a dark age and find primary sources that support that. And some that take the argument that this actually, no, it was a bright age, and then look at primary sources as well. And it's kind of an interesting way to circle back at and thinking about historical thinking. That history thinking is arguments using evidence, and people can come to different interpretations about the past, formulate different theses about what happened in the past based on this evidence. And in kind of Europe, in the medieval Europe, some people, for a long time, was sort of this feudal world, not much going on. But when you dig a little bit deeper, you realize, no, there's a lot was going on, which the lectures talk about. They talk about the formation of the Holy Roman Empire and Charlemagne, and some primary sources we have there, and the wedding of state and church, and the kind of the rise of Rome as part of this Catholic center of Western Europe, Christianity, which will later become Catholicism when it breaks off from the Eastern Orthodox side of Byzantine. And then we get into the Vikings, which are always fascinating. Again, in the lectures, I sort of compared the Vikings to the Mongols. These maritime nomads, they came out of a region. They started to expand out, disrupted a lot of systems and states that they came into contact with through their raiding. But then some groups did settle there. And you have like the Normans that we talk about that become a very influential part that started settle in northern France, but then established the first monarchical system in England in 1066. And then the legacy of that the Viking expansion actually sort of rejuvenated, revived, and reconnected Europe into these extensive trade networks. So I went back and forth, and I went in different states, different kingdoms that emerged. Talked about England and the Normans, the Battle of Hastings, French, the Capetians, the rise of Paris, Germanic worlds that weren't really unified, but definitely had like trading networks. The Hanseatic League remained there. Spain, sort of the slowly re-Christianization of Spain. As well, and then these Venice, Italy, again, no unified Italy, but these different city-states, Venice, Genoa, that were sort of these merchant states that will become, as we'll get to a little bit later, very prominent in the Renaissance period. And then kind of the Crusades, which I sort of talked about in the lecture as sort of a signification or symbolism of a revived, rejuvenated Europe, where now they're reintegrating themselves into world systems, into the Crusades weren't just a religious thing. Hey, we want to, Christians, we're going to attack Muslims. It was, we are now a force within the Mediterranean world. These different kingdoms can unify together against the common enemy to, which, again, but this, as we know now, Islam isn't this like monolithic world. There's different types of Islam. There's different types of Muslims. At this time, the Seljuk Turks, particularly Saladin, which again were part of these Turkish groups that had come in and settled in the region. So it isn't just a East-West or Christian-Muslim. There's a lot of political systems and economic systems, right? Control over trade networks of the Mediterranean as well involved in there, and that's really what the Crusading period is. And that's where we kind of now we kind of know a little more about Western Europe and how it, and Northern Europe and how it developed. I gave some good videos, I think, I tried to talk a little bit and then give some videos about it. The last duel, sort of what these it's a great movie, interesting movie about sort of the tail end of this feudal medieval world. The last duel obviously is the ending of that, where these two vassals duel. So if you want to see what kind of like a feudal duel looks like, take a look at that. The end gets kind of bloody, but you got to kind of see the horse duel stuff. I give a nice video of Paris, the history of Paris, which I think is really interesting. And then that video kind of explains the Crusades a little more. That's a crash course of history, world history. If you ever have any world historical questions, I think that's a pretty accurate site, and also entertaining, right? Tries to kind of make it a little more, not just drab, this happened, that happened, right? What's the guy's name? John something. Can't remember his first name off the top of my last name. But he does a good job, I think, there. So, if you're ever online, YouTube, and you have a question about world history, they've covered pretty much all of it in different, and they're all 10-minute segments, pretty easy to digest. I think that's it. This discussion post for this week. Again, it's more of a reflective post, utilizing this Kyle framework that we've been trying to sort of integrate into the Hawaii Community College experience, your students here. We, ideally, looking back in the future, you're gonna, hopefully Hawaii Community College plays a role in where you're going to go and in your cow and your story. So what's going on, and so look at the layout there. I kind of tried to summarize the main points, but really after 2 weeks from now, you're going to be done. The Hoina, you're going to complete this Wakai. You're going to be gone, but hopefully world history retains itself. Something you've learned from this class that you can apply in other classes or in your life or share with other people, which is what the hyena is, right? That knowledge is worthless if you don't share it, right? That's why you come to school. That's why teachers are here. I've learned a lot about world history. I want to share it with you, and hopefully you can perpetuate that. So that's a discussion post for this week. It's extra credit. It's optional. 10 points. Pretty easy to do. I think that's it. All right. Have a good rest of your week.